Morning, everyone. Hi, everyone online. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to stand here because I have some notes I want to refer to. Well, we could go at this two ways. We could try to convince you of reincarnation, or we could just talk about what the purpose of reincarnation is if we're assuming that that's not a question for you. But I never did meet Voltaire. But if I had met him, I think I would have liked the guy because I've always enjoyed this quote of his where he said, "It's not more surprising to be born twice than to be born once." Which, it's like, right, that's true. We take this for granted. Why would we take for granted that it's going to happen again and again? You know, the fact that it happened once is pretty remarkable. So I think we just need to, I would ask you to just go with me with the assumption that all the great masters, at least that we are tuning into, have said that reincarnation is a fact of God. But let's talk about why it is and what the purpose is and how we can tune into it. Well, think of it as a school. Why do we go to school? You know, I don't want to go to school. I'd rather stay home. Well, no, actually, we need to grow. We need to evolve. There's things we need to learn. Why? Well, just to be able to be more capable in life, to be more able to be happy. That's the ultimate goal of it all. Now, why did God put us here? Why did God create all this? Let's leave that aside for the moment. Let's just assume that the purpose is joy, that God's nature is joy. God is bliss, as all the great masters say. So if we are God's expression, if God created all this, including us, what's the point of it all? What would He like for us? What's His aim? Probably the same thing that we want in our hearts, which is true joy. We want to get back to our true nature. But as Murley referred to in a recent service, the Festival of Light is a really good example of what this story is all about. And we're going to talk about that as we do the Festival of Light later on. It's the image of the little bird going out into the world, or the prodigal son for that matter, or daughter. Going out into the world because that's where God put us. Gain strength and wisdom, its parents told it, and what you acquire, share with others, even as we have shared with you. For you are a part of all that is. But for one reason or another, and this is the big argument we have with God, we get in trouble. We get a little confused. We begin to think of ourselves as separate from others, and therefore we need to claim what's ours. It's unfortunate. It creates a lot of mischief. I saw a documentary on, well, it included chimpanzees, and it was kind of strange because it showed, actually it was on Jane Goodall, and it showed that in the wild, there was this one segment that was heartbreaking, really. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't do this, but I'll tell you about it anyway. Where chimpanzees, they're all getting along well together, and then for some reason, half of the group decides to break out. And then that group decides to come back and do bad things to the other group. Now, why that is, I don't know. Why did God create that kind of thing? Maybe it's to test our skills and to find out whether we really like doing that. Maybe it's to teach us that that doesn't work, that really cooperation is better than competition. And that kind of feels like where we're at on this planet at this time. We're sort of in that chimpanzee mode or the teenage mode of beginning to come into our own and getting a good sense of ego and wanting to exercise it. And then for some reason we kind of think, well, the way to do that is to impress my power or influence over others. And we see a lot of that on the planet. But the real question is that fulfilling? Does that fill our hearts? And I think this is what God is trying to encourage us to follow, is that sense of guidance inside, that sense of connectedness with something higher. So as devotees, what we're trying to do is tune into the guidance of the Guru that's been through all this. As Krishna says in the reading, Arjuna, you don't remember your past lives. I know all of them. Yours, mine, everyone's. And he's saying that, interestingly enough, in present tense. It's not like I remember this. It's like, no, I know them all. It's all just present for me. I think that's a clue for us that when we get into worry or anxiety about the state of the world, which is fairly easy to do sometimes recently, get into the present moment. I enjoyed seeing downstairs where East West is located now, when the rooms are open, and of course everything is very monitored carefully, COVID, regulation-wise. So there's the usual 6 feet distance signs on the floor as to where you should stand before you go into the room. But instead of the usual thing you see, they say, "Be here now." And then 6 feet later, "Be here now." That was great. So I think as we progress through life, it's good for us to remember, be here now, as Ram Dass said back when. And wherever we are next, be here now. Now part of that is just opening up to be who now? Who am I trying to be? Am I trying to be this ego? Or am I trying to be something larger? Swami Kriyananda once, when he was having breakfast with Jyotish and Devi down in Palo Alto, I believe it was, they had this worry on their mind, and they were expressing that to him, a little anxious. And he, as the story goes, had his fork in midstream about to put his scrambled eggs in his mouth. And he put the fork down and he said, "The spiritual path is all about overcoming the ego. We accomplish this by deeper, longer meditations and by seeing God as the doer in everything." And then he picked up his fork and continued eating his breakfast. So that's worth a lifetime of meditating right there. The purpose of the spiritual path is to overcome the ego. Okay, we hear that a lot if we hang around here, and it's a good thing. It's true. But how do we overcome the ego? I mean, just that sounds good, but wait a minute. I kind of like the ego, I know who I am, I'm comfortable with it, I know how to work with it. Why do I want to overcome it? Well, just because it's a limited identity. Why do I want to get out of the first grade? I'm really familiar with this, I got all my friends, I know what the drill is, I like my teacher. I'm not sure I want to go to someplace unfamiliar. But it's because it's growthful for us. And the pattern that God has established for us on this planet, maybe all planets, I don't know, but at least in this one is where we are. It's a system of instant feedback. It's called karma, cause and effect, where we learn through our lessons, like the little bird that we'll talk about later on, what works and what doesn't. It's a great system. So, I get a little upset with somebody just because it feels good, and it may temporarily feel good, but I find that it doesn't feel fulfilling. So maybe I exercise a little more empathy next time. Okay, the bottom line is we learn to work with ourselves. That's the yogic path, that's the spiritual path. It's very, very easy in the world to blame others, to cite the cause of our uncomfort, our dis-ease with things as being out there. It's their fault, that's the wrong cause, and we can get very upset about that. That's what Facebook is all about, I think, is just provoking that kind of reaction to things. But the yogic path, what would we call that? The God's Facebook? I don't know. Our own true face. It's how can I control my own reactions to things? And when I learn to find peace inside, I realize that's where God is. God is in the stillness inside, in the present moment, where I can see more clearly. I can see the people around me more clearly. I can understand them more clearly because I'm not seeing myself as separate from them. I'm identifying them because we're all one. We're all the same expressions of God. And then I feel a heart connection. Then I can feel empathy. Then I can realize we are in the same boat together. And we're at a place where it's just kind of rocky right now. We're sort of in the teenage years where the hormones are bouncing all over the planet, so to speak. And people are trying to exercise influence over one another. All right, so what's our role here? God put us here to express light, to share light. And as the bird is told, what you have, share with others. So whether we have resources, financial, whatever, support whatever you think brings light and hope to the world. If we have light of God inside, we have the blessing of being on this path where we know what brings our own fulfillment to us, share that with others. We have a responsibility to do that, to share the light of hope with others, to represent God to others. What it really comes down to is that God is expressing through us all the time, or at least wanting to. And just even sitting here, I was thinking, okay, what's the best vehicle for God to express through us? If we're kind of stuck in self-identity, which is what we could call ego, being identified with this body, this personality, this habit, bundle, this way of doing things, then that's kind of a limited system for God to flow into. If you were trying to work with people and they're used to an old boss or an old parent or something that said, well, this is the way we've always done things, and I want to stay doing this, but I have these new ideas that are going to bring more happiness. No, I'm not sure I want to do that. Well, that doesn't help. If God's coming along trying to express through us, and we're saying, no, I think I want to be this way. Well, okay, I'll wait till you open up a little bit, but we're going to have to, it may be a little painful stretching that out. Whereas if we just breathe, relax, meditate, that's what all the spiritual techniques are all about, to help us get to that state more and more, where we can just be flexible. We can flow. That's yoga. Being able to flow with, or that's flowing with Brahma, is the experience of God coming to us all the time. When we're in the present moment, when we can just be still in our hearts and remember that God is trying to express through us all the time, then, oh yeah, right. What is trying to happen right in this moment, right now? So what's trying to happen for me is just checking my notes to see if there was something else that I wanted to tell you. You've heard of a life review. People talk about that. We're at the end of our life, many say, that have gone through this and then come back. And there's this moment where God comes and we're sort of one-on-one and we get to see our life before us. And we learn what worked, what didn't. Sometimes people have regrets, wish they could have done it better, etc. There was an individual that was a disciple at the same time that Swami Kriyananda was a disciple of Master. And he was on his deathbed, and Swami was there. And the man was a good disciple, but he got caught up in just feeling regret for the things that he hadn't quite done right. Ever done that? Regret over, I wish I could have done better, it hurt them, it hurt me, whatever. And Swami just was letting Master know just how it was being with this man and mentioned that. And Master said, I'm so sorry to hear that. Just because when a person is identified with regret or despair or sorrow, then that's kind of what we take with us into the next life, speaking of reincarnation. The grades that we want to go through, the lessons we want to learn, if we can just be happy in what we've learned, be happy in what God is teaching us, and not worry about regret. What kind of child does God want us to be? He wants us to be a happy child, enjoying life, enjoying lessons, enjoying the people around us. And if we get stuck sometimes in worry, anxiety, regret, that's kind of a lack of faith. Atheism is a form of lack of faith, or fear is a form of atheism, is what I wanted to say. I've heard people say that. Fear is a form of atheism. So we could say that about anxiety, about the world. How is this all going to turn out? How's it going to turn out for me? And it gets real sometimes. The neighbor we know comes down with COVID, the person we know over there that has a relative just passed on, somebody lost their job. The drama gets really intense. And so what God is saying to us is, can you trust me? How much faith do you have? that I'm in charge, that I got this. Tune in, open up. Let me work through you. Let me flow through you. Let me express light to others. Work with me. Because you are me. We are God's eyes and hands and feet in this world. And the more we can just relax into that and take that role and express that light with everybody else, that's exactly what the world needs right now. And so rather than waiting for a life review at the end of our lives, let's just use this opportunity now to say, okay, what's my main state of consciousness? What am I carrying with me? Sometimes people at the end of their life, all the filters that we use to kind of control ourselves, they sort of melt away, and their natural interior thoughts are what expresses themselves. And that might be anxiety, that might be joy, that might be simplicity, that might be anger. Why wait? Look at what is the main state of consciousness that we have now and think, okay, how can I work with that now? Is that something that I want to carry with me as my main state of consciousness? Do I want to develop that, or do I want to overcome that? The point of the spiritual path is overcoming the ego, which is just limitation, that's all it is. Just being open to the teacher teaching us the lessons so that we can move on to the next grade. And the whole point of that is to be able to expand beyond this limited identity of physical form into what the masters describe of the astral identity, the astral world, which is just pure energy, being able to work with that. And then, this is a little bit far, but then going beyond that into the causal sphere, which is just being able to enjoy just the awareness of things. And then from that, going into melting in God's sea of bliss. We hear the poem Samadhi, which is where Master describes this. Now that may be a little beyond our current state of experience, but the teacher is saying, that's the college that I want you to be in. And it's worth it going there. And I'm going to show you how to get there, step by step by step. But work with me and do the lessons as I give them to you. And don't worry about the fact that, oh, I'm not in college yet. Don't be anxious about the lessons that I could have done better in the grade before. That's just all part of the school. It's all just normal and natural. So the main thing is just to breathe, relax, feel God's presence flowing through us, share the light with others, and do the spiritual techniques that we've been given, which are meditation. Regular meditation, twice a day, is the habit that really enables us to just practice these teachings, to be open and receptive to God's blessings. Energization, that helps us feel God's flow through us, to get our mind attuned to that level of reality instead of kind of, swirling down. The spiral staircase, reincarnation, is just God's system of helping us move up and up and up. And the more we can just assume, instead of arguing with the boss, the more we can assume that, all right, this is for the highest good. This is for the highest good of the planet, for our own highest happiness, and for the happiness of everyone around us. We can get with the system, and it's a lot of fun. Have you noticed that the masters, spiritual masters, they seem to have a lot of fun? Yogananda had a lot of fun. I think Jesus had a lot of fun because they knew the light. They knew that everybody else had it too. And every time, have you ever seen when that kind of spark awakens in somebody else? If you're a parent, you've seen that in your kids. But if you're a minister too, or just being a minister, a sharer of the light, every time you see that spark awaken in somebody else, that's the fulfillment of life. That's the reason to be here. So I want to mention a quote that Yogananda had. You must be very joyous and happy, because this is God's dream, and the little man and the big man are all nothing but the dreamer's consciousness. So just take that joy that the masters have and tune into them and go with the program, what they've given us to do, because it's the greatest joy in the world. and to share that with others, that's what the world's crying for right now. That's what our souls are yearning for, and God has planted that in us. The more we can assume that everything that's happening right now, COVID and all, is exactly the lesson that God's giving us in order to grow. And how can we tune into that best? You know, it may be a hard lesson, but that's okay. We grow hugely when we accept and embrace hard lessons and then go through them. We expand way more than we might otherwise, and we chose to be here this time around. So I'd like to read a Whispers from Eternity. I want to hear thy song in the silence of my soul. Thy gentle voice saying, "Come home," I often heard, but through many lives it was drowned in the tumult of my wild cravings. I have forsaken the jostling crowds of desire. In the solitude of my mind, my devotion bursts to hear thy voice. Take away every dream memory of earthly sounds that yet lurks in my mind. I want to hear thy still voice, ever singing in the silence of my soul. And so on those lines, I'm going to sing a song for you called Through Many Lives by Swami Kriyananda.